Hey everyone, this is Jane with Barlow Herbal, and in this video I'm going to share some information about a beautiful plant in the ginseng family, wild Sarsaparilla, also known as Aurelia nudicalis. Now this is a plant that grows in woody places where there's trees and forests, and it's kind of one of those plants that's like underbrush or undergrowth. Now, the interesting thing about wild Sarsaparilla is that it's easily confused with a couple other plants. One of them is poison ivy. So unless you know exactly what you're looking for when you go out to forage or simply identify plants, is you want to make sure that you know the difference in what these plants look like. Now, if you were to look at wild Sarsaparilla, it comes from a single stem that actually breaks out into 3 leaf formations. And then each of the leaves have 3, 5, or 7 leaves on each of the stems that come out from it. So it's a single stalk without any leaves on the stalk. The stalk is not woody. It simply grows nice and clean. And this is where you get the nudicalis. Nude. The stem is nude, and then it divides into 3 in exactly equal parts, right at the same spot. 3 shoots grow out, and then you've got either 3, 5, or 7. From what I've seen, mostly 5. But the leaves are very similar shaped to poison ivy. You need to know how to identify what the leaves look like as far as the serrated part. And what I would suggest looking for is the more mature leaves. And when you harvest this plant, you're going to harvest the root is in the fall. And it's a lot easier to identify because the leaves are a lot more mature. Now, what's also interesting is an easy way to identify poison ivy between wild Sarsaparilla is that Sarsaparilla has these 3 globe-like flowers that turn into purple berries in the fall. So in the spring, and this is on the mature plants, some of the young, very young plants aren't going to get their flowers until the next season or maybe the next season. So you'll be able to identify a Sarsaparilla in comparison to a poison ivy by its globe of little white flowers. And then as the summer and then the fall, it progresses, the flowers turn into first green berries, and then they mature into dark purple berries. Now, the berries are edible, but they're not consumed very often because where the power of this plant is in its root system. Now, what's interesting about Sarsaparilla, the wild variety, is that when it grows out of the ground, it's a rhizome. And so it goes very near to the surface. And I remember once when I was identifying this plant with my dad that I saw a Sarsaparilla root that was about 18 feet long. So these rhizomes grow along the surface of the ground, and they're very, very easy to pull up. Sometimes you just have to be a little bit patient, but you can literally take the root of one plant and that's all you would need. Even if it's a pretty short rhizome that you end up getting, you can use that, especially if it's just for your own personal use, which is what I would suggest you do. Identify it properly, learn how to, dig up that root, which is actually very easy. You can do it, from my experience, with just your hands. Even though if you had a little garden trowel, it would help you. But this is a very, very skinny root, but it grows very long. Now, the power, like I said, the medicine is in the root, and it's not in the center of the root or the whole root. It's actually the outer bark of the root. If you were to process this to make into a tea or a tincture, a decoction, whatever you were going to use it for, you would wash the roots, dry them, and then peel them so that you're going to get rid of that narrow, skinny center of the root where it's just fibrous, and you can actually chew on it, but it doesn't provide a lot of medicinal benefits. Now, this is something that has been used for centuries, and it grows prolifically. The rhizomes shoot up new plants all along the whole rhizome root system. So they don't grow deep, they grow long, and they just spread out underneath a forest layer. So if you go into a forest, it is native to North America. So if you go into a forest where this grows, you will find that it grows about 18 inches to 3 feet from my experience, and it grows everywhere in places where it grows. In fact, other wildcrafters that I've talked to basically will say that this is a plant that would be very, 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 very difficult to overharvest because it grows in massive quantities. And to me, this is what Mother Nature provides for us, are plants that are prolific. They grow in abundance. They provide magical herbal remedies for us to help ourselves be well and heal. And they're very easy to use. So the biggest thing, like I said, especially with something like wild Sarsaparilla, is making sure that you identify it properly, especially between that and poison ivy. It's also confused with American ginseng. They look a little similar. And I think that that's how wild Sarsaparilla got into the ginseng family, if I were to make a guess. I don't know that for sure. Now, there is something interesting that I have heard of about poison ivy in some people. About 30% of the people who have run into poison ivy don't have any reaction to it. And I know this because I've talked to other herbalists that are really familiar with this. And one of them in particular has no problem touching with her bare hands or anywhere on her skin the leaves or the stalks or the stems or anything of poison ivy. And it has some similar property. It has some similar look to it. The leaves and the stem look a little similar, but it is of course very, very different. So there are some amazing health benefits to Sarsaparilla, besides the fact that it is where originally the flavor of root beer came in, which many people know that. So it has amazing adaptogenic properties, which are similar to ginseng and ashwagandha. So it's got amazing adaptogenic properties. It's also good for respiratory support. It's good as a digestive aid, skin health, and also as a blood purifier. It does so many beautiful things. And one of the things that I've personally used it for is for respiratory health. It makes an amazing decoction, which the difference between a decoction and an infusion is that a decoction is simply plant material that you infuse in hot water and you let it simmer on low for longer than the normal that you would do, like 4 or 5 minutes. That's an infusion. That's a tea. But when you make a decoction, you're going to let it sit for 20 minutes, maybe more. And you just get a more potent, powerful drink, if you will, than if you let it steep for a shorter amount of time. Now, there are some really beautiful things. It's well known for as a survivor plant. So let me share this with you. It's known for its hardiness. It can thrive in a variety of soils, and it's often one of the first plants to regrow in woodland areas. I know people who actually harvest the rhizome roots and they dry them, and it will last them for a long time, all winter long, and they make their own herbal remedies from it. This is something that I would suggest that you go with an herbalist or someone who knows how to identify this properly before you not only touch it, because it might be poison ivy, but before you do any kind of harvesting. Also, make sure that you're in an area where you have permission to harvest. It's private property. You know what you're doing, and you're doing it with respect for the land. And from a lot of the experience that I've had in foraging, places where I've gone, especially on private property, if you know how to do it with respect for the land, what you harvest comes back even more. It comes back more hardy. It comes back more prolifically. It's almost like when you disturb it, it moves the seeds around, it moves the soil around. And this is what plants actually love. So I think what's happening in the world right now is we're learning that Mother Nature provides everything we need. And if we learn how to do things sustainably, the abundance is absolutely crazy. So this is something that I believe might be a little difficult to grow in your herb garden. But I think if you have a shady place, or maybe you've got a lot of pine trees in your yard, or places where it's kind of a forest-like atmosphere, This would be a perfect plant to cultivate and grow in your garden, your medicinal herb garden, but it also makes a beautiful ground cover. It doesn't grow close to the ground. The roots do, but the leaves, they shoot up about 18 inches to 3 feet, and they look absolutely beautiful. And the berries in the fall are these bright purple and gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Now, the time of year you do want to harvest the root is in the fall. Most roots are growing and supporting the top of the plant, the leaves, the flowers, the seeds. And then when all the top of the plant starts to die, then all of the concentration and the medicinal properties can really focus and concentrate in the roots. So from my experience, most of the roots that you would harvest for use in a medicinal way would be to do it in the very late summer or in the fall, as the top of the plant is starting to go into its hibernation. So I would love to know what you know or think about wild Sarsaparilla. It's an amazing plant. It's a beautiful plant, just like all of God's other gifts. And I will see you in the next one.